tell us more about your next book project? Because you and I were already talking about it. And I'm very interested because I really followed that case over the years.
Okay, so that case is the Dan Markell case,
Mm-hmm.
which was a murder of a law professor in Tallahassee, Florida. He was a very well-known law professor, teaching in the area of teaching and writing in the area of criminal law at Florida State University. He had written a book and about 20 plus articles in a relatively short time span. He had been a law professor for 9 years. He was also one of the first bloggers on the internet, blogging about the legal academy, law schools, scholarship, and those sorts of things, founding a blog called Prof's Blog. Was just extremely well connected throughout the law professor world, and was in a marriage that failed. He had two young children. His wife was a clinical law professor at Florida State University. They split up. It was a bad split. They had very different ideas about their children and what was important for their children. And most significantly, Wendi Adelson's family lived in South Florida, which was 7 hours away from where they were living in Tallahassee. And she wanted to go back and live with her family. And she wanted to take her kids with her. And ultimately, they had a hearing in family court in Tallahassee. And the family court judge said, no, you can't relocate with your kids to South Florida. That happened in June of 2013. In July of 2014, a car, a Toyota Prius, pulls up in the garage, just outside the garage of Dan Markell's home. He's in the driver's seat of his Honda Accord, and one of the occupants of that vehicle gets out and shoots him twice in the head and kills him. And from that day forward, Tallahassee police and even the FBI were on the trail of trying to figure out who was in that Toyota Prius and why they were there. It turned out that the gentlemen in the Toyota Prius were lifelong criminals who had very lengthy rap sheets, and they were able to establish they had driven from South Florida with one purpose: to kill Dan Markell. It turned out that one of the occupants of that vehicle had two children with a woman named Catherine McBanawa. Catherine McBanawa, at the very time of the murder, was dating Charlie Adelson, Wendi Adelson's brother. And the suspicion ever since that discovery was made was that Charlie Adelson was instrumental in hiring those hitmen, and that even Charlie and Wendy's mother, Donna Adelson, was intricately involved in the plot to kill Dan Markell, primarily because they wanted those children, Charlie's nephews and Donna's grandchildren, to be raised in South Florida where they could be with them. And the bitter irony is, since 2014, that's exactly what's happened. None of the Adelsons to date have been charged. The two hitmen have both been convicted of murder, and Catherine McBanawa had a mistrial in the first trial that occurred in 2019. In a couple of weeks, she's going to be retried for first-degree murder for her role in connecting Charlie Adelson and the Adelson family to the two hitmen who killed Dan Markell.
Mm-hmm. And weren't there a lot of suspicious transfers of money between whatever her name is, McBanawa
Catherine
and Charlie?
McBanawa.
Yeah, but I seem to remember reading some article where she was claiming she was doing work for Charlie Adelson's dental practice or something. But
so Harvey Adelson, the patriarch of the family, was a dentist. Received his dental training in New York before he moved the whole family, before he and his wife moved down to South Florida to start raising a family. And then Charlie went to dental school and ultimately became a periodontist. But he both worked for the Adelson Institute and also did a lot of work in dental offices, doing extractions and implants at other offices. And what was discovered in the investigation was that Catherine McBanawa received checks every 2 weeks from the Adelson Institute, as if she were working for the Adelson Institute. Those checks started just a couple of months after the murder. And as it turned out, she admitted on the witness stand that she had never worked for the Adelson Institute. But she sort of concocted a scheme with Charlie Adelson, as well as his mom, who signed each and every one of those checks, to defraud the government so that she could get health insurance for her kids and not have to pay for it. And that was the whole scheme, as she testified in her own defense at the trial, as to what those checks were really for. But the other interesting thing is that she had cash deposits going into her 2 bank accounts that she was putting through ATM machines that were tenfold or more the number of cash deposits or the amounts of cash deposits she had in the months and years preceding the murder. And the question was, well, where did all that money come from? She claimed at trial that it came from having worked at various clubs, sophisticated clubs where people would go to do highfalutin drinking in South Florida, and that she was getting cash tips, and that she just got so much in cash tips that she was able to put all that money into the bank, and it had nothing to do with the payoff that she got, which, by the way, one of the hitmen testified that her payoff was something in the neighborhood of $25,000, $30,000, $35,000. And the amount of money that she put into the bank would be consistent with that. But she also wound up having Charlie Adelson's Lexus retitled to her shortly after the murder, and all kinds of other things like that you have to ask the question, why did any of that happen? Why did all of those great benefits start coming her way? And the last of which was she had breast augmentation surgery shortly after the murder. And there was no way to trace the $4,000 that was paid for the surgery. She claimed she paid for it from her own money, but there was evidence that people had heard Charlie saying, or she saying, that she got the money from Charlie Adelson.
Is she still in a relationship with him?
No, that relationship, by the defense lawyer's own arguments to the jury, that relationship ended shortly after the murder. But yet most of these benefits that came to her occurred long after the murder. So again, why? Why was she the beneficiary of all of those good things if she had nothing to do with the murder and she wasn't any longer the girlfriend of Charlie Adelson? There's also a fascinating undercover sting operation that occurred in that case, where Donna Adelson was handed a note by someone claiming to be the brother of one of the hitmen and seeking $5,000 or else. And all of the phone chatter on 2 wiretap lines that occurred after that bump between Donna Adelson and this undercover agent, just fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I remember watching that on TV. Was that the Dateline special or?
Yeah, some of that was covered on the Dateline special. There's also a podcast called Over My Dead Body on Wondery, which is terrific. And my book is going to be way more comprehensive than the Dateline episode Over My Dead Body, just simply because the book medium gives you a lot more opportunity to dig deeper into the story.
Oh, great. Okay, well, I hope you'll come back in the future when the book comes out so we can discuss this more.
I would love to.
That would be great to be the whole subject of another show. So
in the meantime, the book is going to be called Extreme Punishment.
Extreme Punishment. Okay. Yeah. And on that note, it does seem so cruel that Dan Markell's family doesn't even get to see the children, right? Those 2 little boys.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So
ultimately, the mom, Wendi Adelson, started denying them the opportunity to be with their grandchildren. That happened a couple of years after the murder.
Yeah. And it seems like, wasn't Dan an only child?
No, he has
had
a sister who was 3 years older than he.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's still so awful. It's just like with the Young case where the grandmother and the sister at first couldn't even see Cassidy, and
correct.
It's just so awful.
And it leads to the whole grandparents' rights issues, which comes right back to family law. And in Florida, there's a bill that just passed a committee within the last couple of weeks and it's called the Markel bill. To extend significantly the rights of grandparents in certain situations where criminal activity is involved and a parent is preventing grandparents from seeing a child when the parent has some criminal taint around them, like Wendi Adelson does.
Yeah, that's very important. Do you have a few more minutes to answer some more random questions?
Sure.
Okay, I didn't know if you're in a rush to go home. Okay, what are the characteristics of a good client? And if the insurance and the client's interests are different, what does the defense lawyer do if he or she is supposed to represent both of them?
I'll take the last one first, because that's like a standard ethical question that is answered by all kinds of opinions in North Carolina, and I'm sure other state licensing associations. A lawyer owes his duty to a client. A lawyer does not owe his duties to an insurance company. So ultimately, the lawyer has to do what's right by the client. Now, the insurance company can control the purse strings in terms of how much research can be done, how much travel can be done, but ultimately the lawyer owes his duty solely to the client, not to an insurance company. So the other question, if you'd go back to that one, Judy, characteristics of a good client, I'll use family law to do. Not being crazy, that's good.
Pay your bills.
Pays bills, that's good, although get a good retainer at the front end to make sure, just in case. Follows instructions well, is willing to hear when they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing and to correct behaviors. An open mind. The client has to have an open mind to the possibilities and not always thinking they know what's best or what should happen. Those are all good things in a client. Clients that are rigid, that always know best, that display signs of unhappiness from the get-go are bad clients to have, because they're ultimately going to think that they're in a bad position because of you, their lawyer, when the reality is probably the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes from the very first consultation, you can already tell this isn't going to be a good client. I don't want to represent this person.
Which is what, as a family law attorney, you get to do. And I've done that so many times and said, I'm sorry, I just don't think I'm the right lawyer for you.
Yeah. I mean, I've very rarely done that, but there was one time recently when I just basically tried to pawn it off on another law firm. I was like, well, you have so many assets that I think you need a bigger law firm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is a kind of a specific question. I heard someone say a good lawyer can rip apart an ironclad prenup. What are your thoughts? I don't think so. I mean,
well, and I will tell you that prenups are so rare. I've only had one case where a postnup was significantly involved in the case. I have not had been doing this for 7 years now, have not had a single case where a prenup was involved. Prenups are extremely, extremely rare. And a well-done prenup, you can't work your way through it. A well-done prenup where somebody who's about to be a spouse waives alimony, for instance, is probably going to be stuck with that waiver forever. There are some limitations in our statute. Spouse can't be destitute or in poverty. So if that would be the situation, our statute would override a prenup. But outside of that situation, an alimony waiver as part of a prenup. I've had a case that involved a reconciliation agreement where alimony was waived as part of spouse getting back together with their spouse. That also, if it's done right, it's very hard to overcome. So I don't agree with the statement that a good lawyer can rip apart an prenup. But I'll also say that issue arises almost never.
Yeah, that's right. And most lawyers, if they think that it could be kind of a tricky situation, like if one person doesn't know English that well, then usually they will try to they'll be sure to get an interpreter or an attorney that speaks that language, because I've been consulted with where somebody want to bring over somebody from China and they want to make sure that that prenup is going to be upheld. So they're like, hey, Judy, you want to come and represent this person. So, yeah, so this is a totally different question. Has being a lawyer made it difficult to be there for your kids? I have a child. I'll be starting law school in the fall. And one thing I'm worried about is if I'll have time for my child.
Well, those are two different questions. There's the law school
Yeah.
aspect, and I certainly felt like I had a very distinct advantage over classmates who had children and families, because I had enough time to do the readings every night and to prepare ridiculous number of hours before each exam. And I, even back then, and it's 30 plus years ago that I was in law school, really felt for folks who had young children at home who just couldn't commit that kind of time. It's difficult, but if you're committed to it, you can get through it. And being a lawyer, as I have tried to make clear from the outset, the type of lawyer you are and the number of hours that you work is going to be very dependent upon the environment that you create for yourself, whether you're a sole practitioner, work for a small firm, work for government, in-house. And depending upon that environment, you can certainly have enough time to be there for your children. You just have to pick the environment that fits your lifestyle and where you are in life the best.
Yeah, and I do have a couple of friends who were pregnant during law school, and I don't know how they handled it. They probably had their moms come and help out with the baby, or maybe take a semester off or whatever. But they all got through it and are practicing attorneys now. So it can be done, but you definitely have to have a lot of time management and be willing to pay for daycare, or have an in-law or your parent, somebody needs to
Certainly
help.
those who are not attached and don't have children will have an easier time in law school than those who have a lot more commitments.
Mhm.
But if you're like anything else, if you put your mind to it, you can get it done.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think we covered all the questions. Serena says, "Thanks for sharing. Wishing your books much continued
Thank you so
success."
much.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really looking forward to reading the next book. So how much is left to keep writing on that one?
The trial that's happening in a couple of weeks,
Oh.
and outside of that, the rest of the book is written,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
I'm sort of editing and polishing, which I could do for years until somebody says, okay, it's time to get this manuscript to the publisher. And at this point, I can't get the manuscript to the publisher because there's another trial. But once that trial is done, I hope to wrap up fairly quickly, and
mhm.
hopefully the publisher will have the manuscript sometime in March or April.
Yeah. And is the trial going to be live on TV somewhere?
Yes, so sure. Tallahassee Democrat, I'm sure will be live streaming the trial, and the
Mhm,
local TV station will probably be live streaming the trial. So that's the jury selection starts on February 14th. They're hoping to finish the trial the following Friday, which would be a very short trial compared to the first one. Only one defendant this time instead of both Catherine Magbanua and Sigfredo Garcia, the
mhm,
baby daddy of the two kids, who was allegedly the one who put the two bullets in Dan Markell's head.
mhm,
So it's the 14th and the 15th will probably be jury selection. Then the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday would be the beginning of the prosecution's case, and the second week would end the prosecution's case and get into the defense case. There's even a rumor that Sigfredo Garcia, who's been transported to Tallahassee to potentially testify, will be testifying for the baby mama,
Oh.
Catherine Magbanua, in her defense at the second trial. He's already
Mm,
been convicted. His appeals have been exhausted. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison
mhm.
unless he makes a deal. And I think in the meantime, he's going to see what he can do to get Catherine Magbanua acquitted,
Mhm.
so that she can at least raise their children on the outside.
Yeah, what a crazy soap opera and everything. And yeah, and I just remembered the professor that I heard was friends with Dan Markell was Eric Muller. So have
Okay,
you
sure,
talked to
because he's in
him?
the criminal area, and that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so glad that you have written your books to draw more attention to all these cases, and, just make sure that these crimes aren't forgotten, and that the deceased people are not forgotten. And there's just so many crazy cases out there that deserve to have attention.
And Judy, guess what the root to all of it is?
What?
It's what you and I do for a living. It's a marriage that went
Mhm,
bad. And
mhm,
the only difference between our clients and the murderers in these books is our clients eventually figure out that they can live with the detente, or the relationship that they have with their ex, however bad it is, without
mhm,
resorting to violence. The people involved in these books decided the only way to deal with the issue was by killing their spouse.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, just like with that Lacey Peterson case, did you read all about that also? The
Yeah.
Lacey Peter I remember her mother was yelling at Scott Peterson, "Divorce was always an option. Murder never is," just like, oh god, it's like, why did these people do this? Now they're in prison forever, and
Yeah. And so
they're
my first book, Jason Young said he couldn't get divorced because he was fearful that Michelle Young would relocate with their daughter to New York, where they had come from. My second book, divorce wasn't an option because Denise Williams didn't want the stigma of being a divorcee, and because she didn't want to share custody of her daughter with her husband. The third book, the Dan Markell case, they were already divorced. But
Mhm,
Wendi wanted to relocate with her kids to South Florida, tried
mhm.
the legal route, was denied that opportunity, and stuck in Tallahassee for potentially the rest of her life. Somebody decided that, well, we have to just get rid of Dan Markell, and that's the only way we're going to solve that problem.
Yeah, yeah, it's just really despicable, like, hearing about, like, what these people really did and everything, but thank you for writing these books. I hope all the viewers out there will take a look at Mr. Epstein's different books, as well as the new one that's gonna come out this summer about the Dan Markell case. Yeah, so thank you so much. I know we've exceeded well over an hour and everything, so I appreciate you taking the time out on Sunday to come and talk with us.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Judy, the YouTube lawyer. Excellent.
Well, thank you. Okay, why don't you stay on for a minute and we'll go ahead and say goodbye to the viewers out there. Thanks, everybody. See you
Thank
next
you.
weekend.